In these notes, we will spend a lot of time talking about arguments. Now, the word argument can be used in different ways. First of all, you might see Ann and Bob having an argument about who should win the election. Second, you might see Ann present an argument to Bob that the minimum wage should be increased. And finally, in a math or computer science class, you might hear somebody say the function depends on its arguments. Now, in this course and in these notes, we are focused on the second type of argument, where you might think of, for example, a lawyer presenting an argument that her client is in fact innocent. Now let's look at an example. Consider the following argument. We will order either pizza or tacos for dinner. If Timber Pizza is closed, then we will not order pizza for dinner. Timber Pizza is closed, so we will order tacos for dinner. Now, we're not going to spend time now analyzing this argument, determining whether or not this is a good or a bad argument. I just want to talk about the notation we will use to refer to different parts of the argument. Now, the first block of text will be called the premises, or the evidence presented in the argument. The last sentence here is called the conclusion. We will order tacos for dinner. That's what you are concluding. That's what you are arguing for. And finally, this word so is the conclusion indicator. And the conclusion indicator is what helps you identify what the conclusion is. Now here's the example again. We will order either pizza or tacos for dinner and so on. Typically, we will not write down an argument in this paragraph form. We will instead separate each statement of the argument on its own line. So we'll write, we will order either pizza or tacos for dinner. That's a complete single thought. That's one of the premises, and we will write that on its own line. Then we'll write the next premise, and then finally we will write the conclusion. Now, we don't want to get hung up on exactly what word we use to indicate the conclusion, so we will often use some type of notation for the conclusion indicator. What you will often see in logic books are these three dots. They look like a triangle. And when you see this just indicates what the conclusion is. Here we have the list of statements involved in the argument. The three dots in the form of a triangle here indicates what the conclusion is. And you might read this as therefore, or maybe so or hence. Those are all examples of conclusion indicators. I'll often use the word therefore to refer to those three triangles. Now, we will label each of the statements in terms of whether or not they are a premise or a conclusion. So this is the first premise, then we have the second premise, the third premise, and then finally we have a conclusion. And more generally, we might represent these using some variables. So we might have P1, P2, and P3. Those are variables representing the first three premises. And then we have our conclusion C, represented by the variable C represents our conclusion. Now, often we won't draw the argument or represent the argument vertically. We will represent it horizontally this way. We will list all of the premises, draw an arrow, and then write the conclusion, or at least the variable representing the conclusion. So an argument is simply a list of statements. So each of P1, P2, and P3 and C, those are all single statements. Those make up the argument. The important feature of an argument is that it must have a conclusion. So every argument must have a conclusion. The rest of the statements involved in an argument are considered the premises. And it's most natural to draw an argument where we write all of the premises to the left of this conclusion indicator, and then we write down the conclusion. Now, the symbol we will use to separate the premises from the conclusion is this double arrow. The conclusion will come to the right of this double arrow, and the list of premises will be separated by commas, will come to the left of that double arrow. So this is how formally, we will often write down what an argument is. And now, this is obviously a very abstract representation of an argument. I mean, I'm not even telling you, you can't even read off what these premises in fact are. But this will be the general form. This is how we will represent an argument when we study it formally.